This is Bumping Into, where we have interesting conversations with people from all walks of life.
Hi everybody, welcome to the next episode of Bumping Into. This is the story of how Reebok came to be. It is the story that Joe Foster, the Reebok founder, has written in his new book called Shoemaker. I would recommend that you either way, you should read the book, whether you decide to read it after the podcast or before the podcast. It's beautifully written and covers so many aspects of, it's an autobiography, it's a history of the brand, it's a business book, it's a motivational book. It's got a little bit of everything in there, and chapter after chapter, you just want to keep reading. You don't want the book to end. By the time it does, it really feels like you know the characters so well. I was lucky enough to organise a conversation with Joe, who is the founder of Reebok, and ask him some of the questions that I suppose I had wanted to dive a bit deeper in that related to certain points within the book. Hence why I am saying it probably is a good idea if you do read the book. But look, get to the end of the podcast if you are keen to jump straight in. And if you wanted to know more, make your way to the book. I'll put a link on our website where you can grab the book online as well. And here is the show.
Hello.
Hey, Joe, have you got me?
Got you. Yes, I got you.
we finally made it.
No, we just got confused with we moved into summertime yesterday.
Oh, right.
So we're 1 hour earlier, as it were.
Yeah.
This confused Julie. I'm always confused, but this actually confused Julie.
Forgotten about
So she's been trying to get this the timing together.
Oh, thank you. Look, I appreciate it, and pass my thank you on to Julie as well for all her back and forth and trying to line it all up. I appreciate her time and her effort as well.
She's like this. It's almost every day for Julie. This organizing everything. Fortunately, Julie can do the organizing, and I can just sit here and hopefully connect.
I'm so thankful that you've come onto the show, because I've read your book, and I fell in love with your book. I saw it by chance. I was walking past a bookshop, and I just happened to see it, and I grabbed it up and I started reading it that night, and I had to force myself to put it down. Because it's an outstanding book. It's got every aspect of what makes a good book. It's autobiography. It's got history. It's a history of the brand, history of you. It's motivational. It's business. But the thing for me is I love reading, but I'm not overly good at it. To keep doing it. But when a book speaks to you, and that's what yours does. It's almost like you're in the pages. And it just grips you, and you don't want to put the book down. And I ended up getting the audio book, and I put that on, and we went away for a weekend, and I had that on in the car. And every time I'd come back from work, I kept listening to the audio book. My wife was even saying to me, "Oh, what happened now? What happened then? What happened with this?" So it got her hooked on it as well.
Oh, very good. Thank you very much. That's excellent.
So what I thought I'd like to do is, I've made a few points in the book that resonated with me, and I think anyone that's interested in the book and listening to this podcast should read the book first, because there's too much in there. My original, before I'd finished it, I thought, maybe we could do a timeline. But after reading that book, there is no way you could do a timeline in a podcast. There is just too much in there, and too much essential information that ties into the next thing, so there was no way I thought of that. But what I did come up with is giving an overview and then working way through some of these points that I made that I wanted to quiz you on some of the deeper meaning as such.
Great. That's good to me. Yeah.
One thing, and I suppose I'm sure other people probably would have picked up on, is initially when you pick up the book, if you a few pages in, you would, I suppose, when you're reading a book about a successful business, a lot of people think it was either a turnkey success or someone handed them a handful of money and said, go and do whatever you like.
Right.
And especially when, you came from a shoe family, I suppose the initial thing is you could think, he came from a shoe family. He had a head start. He had the factory. He had the know-how. But that wasn't the case at all. It was very much you were born into a working class family, and as it played out, you really had to fight for every aspect within that. It was no one ever handed out anything at the early stages, did they?
Oh no, we were not flush with money at all. Just I suppose what we had was maybe the DNA to say, yeah, we know about shoes, but we needed a successful business. And as you've read in the book, unfortunately, the parent business was being run by my father and uncle. Yeah. And they had no business sense. They just argued, fought, did whatever. So that beautiful business that my grandfather had built was just dying. And we were fortunate enough to have gone away for 2 years doing national service, getting away from the business, seeing other things, coming back and realizing just how this business was failing. It was going down. And yet my father and uncle, it was just a job. It just paid them money. They were just going through life. Yeah. They were not experiencing business. And I guess that something inside Jeff and myself said, no, this is a business. We need to create one, because this is going to be dead long before our father and uncle are dead. And it did. It died 2 years after we left.
And what was interesting is your grandfather was much more like you, in that he was more of that entrepreneurial spirit and more pushing the boundaries and looking to be better, to do more, and even had a bit of that marketing sense. Like, I suppose maybe it was that founder's hunger that fueled that a bit more for him.
Yeah, I also think way back in 1904, when he obviously gave the shoes to Al Shrub, who broke 3 world records. So he was an influencer. He knew what influencing was about. Yeah. He knew that give things to the right people and the word will spread. And so he was brilliant at that, absolutely brilliant. And yes, had he been, well, I don't know, maybe, I was born on his birthday, 18 months after he died, which is rather a coincidence, but possibly had he been born when I was born, he would have been an Adidas or whatever. He would have been a number one. Mind you, we did get to number one, we did get to number one. But he was obviously brilliant at what he did.
That's interesting. One of the things that resonated with me is you mentioned in the book that the path to success wasn't straight or defined. A lot of decisions were made off the hoof, and it took 30 years. And, you said if you may have arrived sooner if you'd made a few different decisions, but this is what grabbed me, is you knew that without that long meandering journey, you wouldn't have been prepared for the destination. Is there obviously you feel in the book that there was this unfolding of one happened and the next happened, and it was then a one step back and then another step forward, 2 steps forward. But what was it that made you feel that you needed that 30-year period rather than having all the wishes come at once?
Well, we had to make do with the business that we had. The problem is when Jeff and I left the parent company, the big business really in the UK was football, soccer, football. But Adidas, by that time, Adidas had come in and Adidas owned football. For us to go into football, we would have needed to have spent an awful lot of money. That was so we couldn't get there. So we had to take a meandering route. We had to find a way to the top which didn't involve football. My grandfather had been supplying 96 of the league clubs. My grandfather was supplied with training shoes and football boots. So what happened when my uncle and father took over the business? They didn't see where the business was. They were just happy. The business was so good, the orders just came in daily. Everything just came in. They didn't have to go and look for the business. Yeah. They didn't have to push the business. It just came to them. Grandfather did too good a job on the business, but he hadn't done a good job on his sons. He hadn't led them into, this is what we've got to do. They obviously never sat around and talked about business strategy. So they didn't have any. And when Jeff and I came in, we looked, and what was our business strategy? Well, how do you get to the top when this big football, which was big in sport, when that was so big that we were just minute little company in athletics. And the only way that I could think is that we needed America, because in America, athletics was something big, and running became massive in America. So that's where the market was. So we had to deviate quite a bit. Instead of being nice and straight and growing big in England, in the UK, and mind you, we did become acknowledged as the #1 athletics company, running company in the UK. We were #1 there. But really, to get a business to really get big, we needed to go to America. So the strategy was, how do we get volume? And of course, as you know, the volume didn't come through actually manufacturing. The volume came through marketing. And we had to go to South Korea to get production, and we had to go to America to get the sales. So, it was a route that not always was it planned. But, when you see the opportunity, you have to go and chase it. And that's what we did. And we had an awful lot of luck. But, I'd like to say 30 years of working at it, then overnight we get success. And we did. Once we got into America, we got success.
In the book you talked about, you touched on the sacrifices and the toll that it took to get to that point when it became the biggest sporting brand. In retrospect, would you say that there's simply no other way that you could have done it without that toll and sacrifice, that it was, you just can't build what you built if you turn up 8 a.m. and leave at 5, 6 o'clock every night? It's just not going to happen any other way?
Well, it was 8 o'clock would be late to start, and 6 o'clock would be early to finish. This was much more consuming than that. Any path to wherever you want to go, it's not so easy. I can see the path and just go. For some people, maybe that happens. But for us in those days, we didn't have social media. We didn't have computers or smartphones. We just didn't have those things. So for me to take the company forward, I either had to get on the road or get on a train or get on an airplane. Yeah. I had to go places, meet people. And there's a tremendous amount of luck as to meeting the right people, being there at the time. But, I went to America first time in 1968, and we didn't get a foothold in America until 1979. That's 11 years. And
that's a long time.
It is long. Today, it's a very long time. In those days, I was just going to America. I was trying to break into that market. And I had 6 failed attempts. I had 6 people that I started to work with. They started to import the shoes, but they just didn't get in there. And it was 1979 before we actually got in there. And as you've read the book, we did that by having a 5-star shoe.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. When you go back to I suppose, being away and traveling a lot, the key thing was that Jeff was there when you weren't, and Jeff was working, and it seemed as if that Jeff was very much in the workshop working on the product while you were the one out working, pushing the business aside, I guess you would say.
Yeah, well, Jeff loved the factory. He really loved it. He loved making shoes. He loved doing all the work to bring it from a drawing to a shoe. He loved the development with me. And he said to me, Joe, he said, I love this. You do everything else. So wow. I was left with everything else, and whatever that meant, whether it was selling, and I'm sure I made a ton of mistakes. I must have done along that route. And I know one almost took us out of business, but you don't see the mistake. At the time, you see these things as opportunities, but sometimes the opportunity leads you down the wrong path. And so I made a lot of mistakes. But the one thing, we had seen my father and uncle fighting, feuding, just completely not talking to each other. And if they did, it was bad words, bad feelings. And Jeff and I never had a bad word together at all. And I must have done an awful lot of things wrong, but he never felt that he would chastise. And I think maybe he thought, well, I like the factory and we're doing okay. The rest of it, he didn't have any feeling for marketing, sales, developing the business. but he knew I was sort of more of that personality. I could be more outgoing. I could jump on a plane with a handful of American Express travelers checks and go somewhere and not worry about where I'm going and why I'm going, but just go somewhere and meet people. So we had, I don't say we wrote anything down, but we definitely had different roles well defined in the company. And Jeff just stayed with the factory and I did the rest.
And when, like, obviously once it grew bigger, you had people come in that, like Paul Fineman and Shu, who were, key, I suppose, partners, whether they were at that time bought-in partners or whatever, but they were helping the same cause. But before that point, when it's very much Jeff was there and you were out on the road, and you even made the comment at one point that you said it felt like you were just running around putting out fires. Was the a lot of businesses end up getting, well, if they can, a person that becomes the right-hand man, someone that, if you're not there, they're making that decision how you would want it. And it seemed like it was very much all on your shoulders until it got quite big, rather than you having that offsider to bounce things off or to do some of your workload.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got to look and say we're viewing things now with the technologies that we have, particularly the media technologies. We're how many miles apart? 4, 5, maybe 7,000 miles apart, and yet we can just sit here as though we're just at the other side of the table and have a chat. There's no problem with it. It's great. Zoom is absolutely brilliant. When I went anywhere, I'd be lucky if I could get a telephone call to the office, to the factory, because in those days we didn't have satellites. We had underground lines, so there were just wires, and there's only so many wires you could put underground. So if I'm in Italy, and I can quote Italy, being in Italy, I go to the desk of the hotel and say I want to make a call, and I'd give them all the detail, and then say we'll call you back. And sometimes that would take 3 days.
Jeez.
They couldn't get a line through from Italy to the UK because lines were busy. And, right now with satellites, it's incredible, and everything's digitalized data. It's all so different. So when I'm making a decision, I just had to make a decision where I was, and that was it. And Jeff in the business, he ran the factory. So whatever decisions he had to make on his own. And Jeff's was not as varied as mine, but this is how we had to work. And it's, I mean, we're almost two separate businesses in a way. I was a marketing business and Jeff was making shoes. He was a factory. So, and this is how we grew. I mean, normally, if we'd have been in football, we would have been selling to every sports shop in the country, in the UK. And that would have been a nice big business for us. That would have been a big business. But we, as I say, we couldn't get into that. So we had to spread out, get to America. And it's only when we got to America, really, that gave the company the opportunity to really expand, to explode. For me, the American market was so influential on global business, and certainly on global sports business. And so getting into that's why I took 11 years. I had to get in. It wasn't a question of, well, it's too tough, I've got to give up. No, we had to get in. And good fortune was on our side, because running in America, at the very late 60s, it started to grow. And with it, the magazine Runner's World. And Runner's World was just an A4 page. By 1975, Runner's World was a glossy 50-page magazine telling every runner where the next races were, who won the last races. It was a Bible. And everybody, in America, think 350 million Americans, 10% by that time were running. They were going out, training, running shoes. So you're thinking 350, that's 35 million.
A lot of people.
A lot of people. And Runner's World, Bob Anderson, his success was amazing, just as Nike. Nike grew with that same growth. But Bob Anderson thought he could tell everybody which shoe to wear. And so he said, I'll tell you the number one shoe. And he did. And that was Nike. It was a Nike shoe. But Phil Knight is importing his shoes from Japan.
Yeah.
Now, and if we think there's 35 million runners, 10% are going to want that number one shoe. 3.5 million runners want to buy that Nike shoe. How does he get 3.5 million out of that production factory? How does he get that growth? He didn't. He just didn't. And by the time the production was moving up, 12 months later, Bob Anderson said, oh, no, there's another new shoe now. This is a number one. And it was like just a matter of him deciding which was number one. And how do you do that? And that disrupted the retail business. The retail business in America, it was disrupting them because the demand was for a shoe they couldn't get. And when they could get it, all of a sudden, the demand was for another shoe. So I don't know whether Bob Anderson was sort of instructed or whatever, or making a decision, but he changed from telling everybody which was the number one shoe to he went to a star rating. So 5 stars, where you could have 4 or 5 shoes at 5 stars, and then it would go down 4 stars. And I knew when he did that, I knew we could make a 5-star shoe. I knew we could do that. We were in the business. That's what we were. We were an athletic shoe company. We knew exactly how to make a 5-star shoe. You couldn't guarantee it, but we knew how to do it. And getting that 5-star shoe, that's what made the difference. Because instead of me trying to push my way into America, all of a sudden, this was the hook. The hook was, Reebok is 5-star shoe. We want. Just like Bob Anderson saying that's the number one shoe, all of a sudden people wanted Reebok. And that was the difference. It was finding the way that there was a hunger for your product. And once you got it in there, that started the growth. But say, it took me a while to get to America in the first place, and then it took me 11 years of going to America to really get that opportunity. And from then on, of course, we just grew.
Yeah, Jesus. So the other thing that really, I suppose, I resonated with, and it was obviously a very sad chapter, is once your brother Jeff died and replacing him, and you mentioned that it took 3 people to fill his role, what he was doing, and I mean that's to lose your brother and your best friend and your business partner. Your ability to pick up and keep going was extremely strong. It was amazing. I can appreciate what that impact would be like. I mean, my brother and I are very close, and we've worked together in a small business for 20 years. And for me to think of plucking him out of the equation, the first thing in my mind is there is no more business. He's that influential and that important in it that I couldn't fathom pushing forward. And it just must have taken every, bit of I suppose, a stoic mindset for you to just pick up the pieces and say, well, we have to continue.
Yeah. I mean, I think as you're looking inwards on what happened. When I was there, it was a tragedy, an absolute tragedy. We'd just got into America. We were on that cusp. Jeff's role would have changed. He would have been going to Korea. He would have been developing the shoes. He would have been doing all that. And all of a sudden that wasn't. But whilst this is a tragedy, and I think that you would probably be the same, you turn around because you have a mission. And the two of you had a mission. And I guess what it did for me was, well, no, you double the effort because, no, we are going to succeed. We're definitely going to succeed in spite of. And because you lose somebody like Jeff, losing Jeff was, as I say, an absolute tragedy. But the thing is that everything came on my shoulders then. I hadn't got Jeff. But, you can then make decisions. It sounds weird, but you can make decisions without even having to look at anybody. And, it's almost... it's almost an anger. It's almost a sort of in spite of. You just do. You make those decisions, and you take the whole thing and you're absolutely determined that this is going to work, because the structure was still there, the factory is still there, the people were still there. There was a guy who could just, he was the guy who ran the factory anyway. Jeff was sort of controlling it, doing everything. But the guy on the floor, Norman, who was called, he could keep the factory going. Then I needed somebody else to do the designing, which I brought in, Paul Brown. And there was a girl I knew who was very efficient at office work, so she could look after the office. So yeah, it took 3 people to do what Jeff had been doing. But they were not difficult decisions. It was like, how do I do this? No, it wasn't how do I do this. I do this. And surprising enough, and I'm pretty sure that anybody in my position would have probably been the same. I don't think I was exceptional in doing this. I just think that it's almost like you can't say, look, we've gone so far. We've got to this place. We can't go back, So with or without, we've got to keep going. Yeah. And I'm sure Jeff would have been absolutely delighted at, if you have a regret, one regret I have is that Jeff never saw the growth of the company to be a number one. So, and that's very sad. But I guess, again, you throw yourself into the business, so you have no time to worry about these things. You've just got to get on with it, and you just make sure that you work.
Do you think that it was ultimately the hunger that you had and Jeff had as well, but to be the best shoes, or was it that you had in your mind the biggest?
I don't think I ever had in my mind biggest. I can only sort of say it's like, the race isn't over until you've won. And there are many stages in that race that you're not winning, but it's not over until you've won. So it was like, okay, no, we're going to go around this. We're going to go through this. There's another way. That, there's not a stage where you stop and say, enough's enough. There's never was that stage. It was always a question, right? If you hit some barriers, come on, we can either go over, we can go around, we can't go through. So we've done that right from the early days of having to change our name. We had to change our name, and then we had to change our silhouette. Our silhouette used to be 2 stripes and a T-bar. But we were only 4 years into our business, and we got this letter from the lawyers at Adidas, and they said your silhouette, your side stripes, they're infringing the Adidas 3-stripe mark. And we're a small company. You look at this piece of paper and say, what's all this? And it took us 2 or 3 minutes, and then we started smiling. Just a minute, Adidas know we're here.
Yeah, they're worried.
Yeah, Adidas need to tell us that we're infringing something. Yeah, and that letter was pinned to the wall for many years. It was that goes on the wall. And what did we do? We just changed the silhouette, and we changed it to the vector. And that was so much better, so much more definable, so much more different than the 2 stripes and the T-bar. So out of what seems to be a problem, sometimes it's sent to you because, come on, you got to do better than what you're doing. You got to do something better. And that's how we took it. A problem is, okay, we've got a problem. It's because we're doing something wrong. Let's turn it around. Let's see if we can make that problem into an advantage. And we did. We started off our business as Mercury Sports Footwear. We liked the name Mercury. It was good, but we ended up with Reebok. And Reebok was so much better because it rolls off the tongue so much easier.
Absolutely.
And it's stronger. So we end up with a better name. We end up with a better silhouette. And a lot of these things that happen in life are opportunities. You look at them sometimes and they hit you as a big problem, sometimes really severe, but they are opportunities. And you've got to take those opportunities.
Do you think one thing I've often wondered with manufacturing and coming from a small business as you started, where your heart and soul's in it, when you've got the business built around I suppose even for you lived in the premises, but you've got the office and you've got the factory floor, things that are happening in the office are a result of what's happening in the factory floor, and those people see those products walk out the door. As soon as you pluck that away, you take manufacturing, obviously everyone goes offshore, but be it off premises, if you're taking that to another country, do you think does it change the dynamic of the staff? Does it all of a sudden remove a little bit of soul from that company?
Well, I think that one of the most important things on building any company is you can't do it on your own. You need help, you need people. And you need to relate to those people. They need to relate to you. They're not employees. They're part of the company. And they've got to feel part of that company. And that way, when we had trouble, people, and we did, we went into serious trouble. We lost a distributor and that nearly took us out of business. But it meant even in those early days, we had to cut our staff and cut them down. But then they wanted to come back. And some even wanted to work for nothing. So it's building a culture. So we were building a culture, and we always gave the information. We shared everything with the staff so that they felt a family, and you grow this family. Now, when we were taking production to the Far East, it was a question of saying to the guys, look, guys, to succeed, this is what we're doing. But we're a small factory. That doesn't matter because we're creating a big company. And a big company needs a lot of specialization, a lot of special shoes, cricket boots, things like that. This is not a tremendous business, but it's a nice business. And that you can do in your small factory. Yeah. So we had high jump shoes, shot put shoes, things like that, things which are very specialized, track and field shoes. These things, you need them. And shoes for some special athletes. If you have an athlete and you need to make something special for it, you can do that. So with the small factory, we had this big advantage. This is where you could start to develop the product. You could get your ideas through. So the small factory was excellent. It was really good for us at that time because we could keep doing the specialized products. Whereas the volume had to go to the Far East, and that's where we get price.
And what do you think would have happened if Reebok didn't crack the American market? Do you think it would have still stayed in a small factory, or would it have just, fizzed away? Or was there enough in your own area to make it still a thriving business?
Simple answer to that is I never think that way.
Right.
I never think of failure. It's not part of the psyche. If we're not making it one way, we make it a different way. We turn, we twist, we find something.
You don't sit static.
It's you move forward. It's like history. People say, "What would you do if this or what?" And I say, "Well, or what would you done differently? Now you're where you are. What would you done differently?" And my answer to that is, we became number one. We overtook Adidas. We overtook Nike. We became number one sports footwear brand. What's to change?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And in that early time when Paul Feynman came on board, and obviously he was a huge part in growing that American market.
Absolutely, yes.
What do you think? So there was the Nikes. There was the I suppose Asics would have been probably being then, and Adidas Asics would have been as well.
Yeah. Asics have been around all the time. Adidas were there, of course. Nike was the big one. New Balance was there. Saucony. There was a lot of shoes around.
Right. Yeah.
Brooks. Yes.
And what do you think he gravitated towards? Why do you think he had that? I can do something. We can do something. Was it a styling difference, or was it? He felt your drive. Was there one thing that you could pick on that he saw that point of difference?
I just think Paul was the right man at the right time. He was hungry enough. He was hungry to want to do things. But I mean, you've read the book. Running wasn't our big success. We were able to turn and maneuver because down in Los Angeles, Arthur Martinez, he was a tech rep. He was a good athlete, Arnold, but he was a tech rep. So we would go into the stores and he wouldn't be selling the shoes. He would go in and he would go to the salespeople and show the salespeople the good points of the shoe, tell them all the best things. But his wife, Frankie, she was going to aerobic classes and coming back with her friends and they were full of this. And Arnold said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Well, we're doing aerobics." And he said, "What's that?" And she said, "Well, it's exercising to music." "Really?" "Yeah." He said, "I'm going to come down to your next class. Is that okay?" Yeah. So we went down to that next class. And he sees the instructor in a pair of sneakers. I think there would probably be New Balance, because New Balance did start off making an all-white sneaker. And so the instructors in a pair of sneakers, half the class are in the same sneaker. Whatever the instructor were, they would buy. And the rest of the class, they weren't wearing anything, no sneakers.
Oh, yeah.
And this was sort of a light bulb moment for Arhill. He thought, why don't we make a specific shoe for aerobics and for women? Because they were all women. On a woman's last, which is narrower, only in women's sizes, and make it out of glove leather, soft, so it feels as though they're putting a glove on it. Oh, beautiful, comfortable. And with this idea, he went from LA, took the red eye up to Boston to see Paul Fireman. And he's telling Paul Fireman, "Look, Paul, this is going to be big. It really is. It's there and it's moving." In LA, everybody's now starting to do, all the women are doing aerobics. And Paul's saying, slow down now. We're a running company. What do we want to be doing making dancing shoes? Oh. Well, and Paul was saying, keep your eye on it. We'll see how it goes. But Arnold wasn't happy with that. So we went round to the back door to Steve Liggett. Steve Liggett was in charge of production. And he was very persuasive. And he persuaded Steve to make him 200 pairs of this new shoe, which he did. He took it back down to LA, gave it to the instructors and some of the girls that were leading it. And that was it. End of story. Because whilst we had probably 2 or 3 months where really, had this happened in any other part of the world, Reebok would have gone out of business because the shoes were made of glove leather. Now, glove leather is just like a piece of paper. You can pick it up and you can tear it. It's just so easy. So put somebody's foot in it and it was just at the sides that were breaking away. We did cure that. And in many ways, I've got to say that, I'm saying you can't do it. So they line it with nylon. They put nylon on the inside to strengthen it. That's great. Now I'm saying, look, you've now stuck nylon to it. And you've stopped the leather from breathing. Oh, right. So what do? They punched holes in the front. They put holes in it to allow it to breathe. And this is marketing. This is like, we're moving forward. This is not shoemaking. This is marketing. Shoemakers stop at the idea that you don't use glove leather for shoes. Eventually we got that right, and it was more like garment leather. So the garment leather would wait. But the girls loved the shoes that much. Even after a month, the shoes fallen, they went out and bought a new pair. But then when Jane Fonda went out and bought a pair to use in her videos, she actually bought a pair of Reebok to use in her videos, her exercise videos. And it just, all of a sudden, it exploded. We were a $9 million company at that time. Year after that, we were 30 million. Year after that, we were 90 million, then 300 million, then 900 million. So within 4 to 5 years, we'd gone from zero to almost $1 billion. And that was the explosion. And that was women. Because this was just made for a woman's foot. And the men started saying, why can't we get these shoes? Why can't we? But it was on a woman's last, only in women's sizes. So by the time we started making them for, different sports, but in that soft leather, by that time, the men were so hungry, they just went out and bought the shoes. And then that was I think the first one was the Exafit trainer. And so it just grew. So that was how Reebok really grew. Hitting on that, being able to see something. And it wasn't me. It wasn't Paul Fireman. It was Arthur Martinez who spotted that. But, we were part of a company, part of a successful company. And a winning company, that success, it breeds other things and ideas. And I got out of the company at the end of 1989 because we were then almost 4 billion. After putting Paul Fireman on in the USA, I was just going around the world putting on different distribution. I put 30 distributors on. I remember coming to Australia very well and putting the handlers on. The handlers took over in Australia. And so I was going around the world doing this. And by the time I retired, I'd put 30 different distributions on all around the world. And the company got that big that now we're full of accountants, full of lawyers, and a lot of people in between, and we had become corporate. And at that point, yeah, I mean, there was some great fun. We put on the pro celebrity tennis matches in Monte Carlo, and I was hosting those. So we got all the people from Hollywood. They were always in there. You're meeting people like Sinatra. You're meeting. I've got a list here: Linda Evans, Joan Collins, Frank Sinatra, Sean Connery, Roger Moore, Jane Seymour, Chuck Norris, Robert De Niro, Michael Caine, Charles Neston. They were just endless, and those were great days. But you do realize that this is going to end. It's okay. But I decided to get out at a certain point, and that was at the end of 1989, because I was just traveling the world. Wherever I went, I was picked up in a limousine. I've been used to just grabbing a taxi when I could get it in my early travels, but now I'm picked up by a limousine, go to the best hotels. We're dining at the best restaurants, and I'm thinking, but there's no challenge anymore. This is not a challenge for me. No, so now was the time to get out. Okay, what do I do now? I have a new challenge, the book. Shoemaker is my new challenge.
So do you think that, with I suppose eventually you getting out and leaving, because it very much read like it was a gradual, you formed the American part as a percentage, and then you sold that off, and then Paul bought the other part, and then you stayed on as ambassador. It was this, constant, I suppose, changing of roles, winding down. Do you think that made it easier rather than some mystery billionaire turning up and saying, here's X amount, give me the keys, thanks for coming, where that would have been quite a hard thing to walk away from as opposed to the way it played out?
It probably was much easier to do that. But for me, it wasn't a question of who's going to buy the company. It was a question of, Joe Foster, you've done what you've done. You've got to a stage. We need new people. We need people to take over. You can't keep on running the company from being 23 to being 55. And you run out, not so much that you run out of ideas, but ideas change. New things come in. So you've got to bring new people in, allow new people the ownership, because that way they put their soul into it. And that helps it to grow. It grows when people believe. If people come in and just want a 9-to-5 job, those some people do that, of course, but part of the mechanism of running the company, they have to be, it's your family, and they're there all the time. When we were in the UK, we were talking to America. Well, say it's midday, 5 p.m. So we'd be talking till maybe 8 and 9 p.m. at night with America. And in the morning, we'd be up early because all our product was coming from Korea. So by the time it was midday in Korea, we were just about getting up. So we had to be up early. So our days, 7 till 7, that was all the time. But we loved it. And everybody loved it. Everybody's part of it. And yes, we were lucky to see the success. When you could see and you could feel the success. I think this is so much motivation in there. So people, you need really good people. You don't need egos. You just need people. And a lot of good people who want to belong and who want to drive the company.
And obviously Reebok eventually then sold to Adidas, your fierce rival. Once that happens and it joins within another massive corporation, do you think that there's any hope that part of that culture and exactly what you were saying about the people that coming in and treating it like a second family, do you think that fails to exist in that dynamic as it's all over once it gets to that level?
I think that there's definitely an underground. Well, I don't think it's the people in the company then. I think it's the people who grew up with Reebok. Because even today, when I talk to a lot of people, certainly a lot of the Americans say, I remember buying my first pair of Reeboks, and they were expensive. They were pumps. We had to save up. It's like, and then those So those are the people who've kept Reebok alive, the people who have worn Reebok, who have a love for the brand. I mean, at one time, we actually supplied 60% of the American market. 6% of Americans had worn a pair of Reeboks, which is an incredible amount of people. So those people are in the late 40s, early 50s, in the 50s, and they have money now.
Yeah.
They have a position now, and they have memories, and they still love Reebok. Fortunately, they've not lost that feel for Reebok, so there's still a good feel. Adidas, no. Adidas lost the plot altogether for Reebok. You can't blame Adidas. They pay nearly $4 billion for the company.
Wow.
When you pay that sort of money, it's like you're almost entitled to do what you want. It's your company. So you couldn't expect them to sort of, they didn't build Reebok. They built Adidas. They took a lot of the assets from Reebok and put them into Adidas. And that helped Adidas to build, which is, and people are saying, well, Adidas didn't do Reebok anything. But, they bought it. And that for me is like, who's to blame? The people who sell it or the people who buy it? These are the questions. But Reebok remained strong, and they've been sold again. So only recently, it was the 1st of March when ABG took over. That's Authentic Brands Group. They're the American group. They're really a licensing group. And at the moment, what they're doing is licensing the Reebok name. Now, this, given time, that wouldn't be the best way to do it. But what's happening, in the immediate sense, what is now happening is that the visibility of Reebok will go up immensely. All of a sudden, you'll see Reebok globally. And Reebok, when they bought it, was about a $1.5 billion company. They'd gone down from being a $4 billion to a $1.5 billion under Adidas. They expected to be back at $5 billion next year.
Wow.
So that's a tremendous growth. And by 2030, they expect to be $10 billion. I think they're underselling at that point. I think they'll be about $15 billion by 2030. They only need to do some of the right things, because there's a lot of people who still love the brand and who still like to see that brand grow again. But
and
in that period,
you still got, like, as far as their current range of shoes, do you still keep a close eye on what they're releasing and what they've got out?
Yeah, I mean, we're plugged into the Reebok alerts on Google, so we see everything that's coming out. And well, I've been part of one or two of the later sort of collaborations. We were in Dubai, and they've just done a collaboration. Amongst few did a collaboration, and they wanted me to do a bit of narration on it. So they asked me to do some, ask me some questions. Wow. They produced a video with me talking on this, and it sold out within minutes. Big. Jeez. So, there's an awful lot of things going on. It is an exciting time. You can do the best out of anything. It's just a matter of which way you look at it. If you say, oh, it's going to be licensed now, and there's going to be 6 or 8 different manufacturing units, but once that happens, great. Then you've just got to say, well, how are we going to pull that together? I don't think ABG have a strategy, because AGB, they've been used to buying failing brands which have been really going down. And then they use the name and they license the name. They don't actually build a brand. They just sell product. Now what they've got to decide with Reebok, which is the biggest purchase they've ever made. They've got to decide whether they want it to be a brand or just a name. And I think they're going to be. I think they're going to find themselves having to make it a brand. I think they're going to find themselves in that. There's going to be too much pressure to say, right, where's the strategy? They don't need a strategy yet. They don't need that. All they need to do is to make the shoe more visible. And that's the first thing. So you'll get tremendous visibility. I forget who now was taking on the Australian market, but there is about 6 or 8 different distributors. We're going to America in 3 weeks' time, but we're also going to Toronto. And the new people in Canada, they just want to meet us. The new people just want to meet us. So we can see, and if we have any persuasion at all, we shall start talking to people about coming together, making sure that everybody else is working together, and you've got a common purpose. So it is bringing out a strategy, a culture, bringing out that Reebok culture again, that feeling for the brand and where we could take it. But I mean, this is what happens if people get behind something and people have, it's not just we're just selling another pair of shoes. We're selling Reebok. You've got to be selling the brand, and it has to be the brand, not just a name. And I think that the enthusiasm for the brand is going to really take ABG into a different dimension. And ABG, Reebok was on the market from Adidas, and everybody said it was worth about $1 billion. That was it. Now, they paid $3.6 billion, but now, since they'd sold off and they'd not done what they could do with Reebok, it was worth $1 billion. And I knew at least 3 of the companies that were bidding for Reebok. I didn't know ABG. We knew of them, of course, and ABG came in, and ABG bought it for $2.5 billion. And one of the companies that we knew were interested, they came up and said, wow, we didn't know we were so far away from the bid. And so everybody now is saying, but 2.5, they've overpaid. Just as everybody said, Adidas overpaid at $3.6 billion. Now they got $2.5 billion back from ABG. Everybody's saying they overpaid, but did they? I don't know. Because I think one of the best things that ABG could do is doing exactly what they're doing now. It's much more visible, do these deals for retailing, but they've got to then put a control in. And then I would hope they might float the company. And if they float the company, they would get the 2.5 billion back, because by that time they'd have gone to a 5 billion. In 2 years, they would go to a $5 billion company. They're going to float that for a lot of money and get their 2.5 billion back overnight. Easy, and still own 50% of the business. They still own a lot. So if they do that, and then they grow that center, which is going to be the control, the brains, the ideas, the innovations, and take Reebok now, wow, back to the number one.
Yeah.
Is there any reason why not? And it's all to do with the people, the enthusiasm, the feelings for what can happen. So, I think it's exciting times for Reebok, and
definitely.
We're over in America. In fact, we're over in America in the mid June to September. We're doing 12 weeks tour with the book with Shoemaker.
Geez, okay. Just on that, England and America, in the book you mentioned that you noticed the huge difference of culture between. In America, it was proud to strive for more, but back in England, it was like, no, stick in your lane. Mediocre is where you want to be, and don't push too far past that.
That's right.
Do you think, does that still, I mean, I've got a soft spot for England. I've always related to the old English architecture, and I love old English TV shows like Open All Hours. So that difference between the cultures still existent, or do you think now it's much more level playing field?
It's becoming more level, but the culture is still the same. Yeah, the culture is still one of don't go beyond what you're expected to do.
Okay.
Stay in your own lane and whatever. There's much more. Now we have computers, and everything's going digital, and everything, all the technology. I think this is being it's drifting away more. But anybody in sort of middle age, between the 50s or something like that, still has that feeling that know your place.
Jeez.
We are, yes. I think the whole of Europe has that sort of feeling that you should know your place. And I think that's a European thing. Whereas people who've emigrated to America, Canada, Australia, they've been able to open their minds a bit more to, the horizon. Well, when you get to that horizon, there's another horizon. There is no such thing as reaching it. It keeps going. The horizon keeps going, so you keep going. Everything is sort of achievable. Yeah. Everything. They talk about education, and the problem, if you get too much education, you get steered down a route, and you can't get out of that. You will become an accountant. You will become a lawyer. You will become somebody who does a specific job. And it's only the people who don't really go down too much education that they think a bit, they step at one side and they do other things. I've been doing talks at universities for the MBA classes, and these are, these are bright people. But they ask the question, well, we all want to be entrepreneurs, and yeah, you can all learn from an MBA. That's great. Learn as much as you can, but do understand that if you want to do things, and you want to be an entrepreneur, you've got to take risks. And MBAs don't teach you how to take risks. They teach you business administration, and so you've got to be willing to just take that risk. Sometimes it's quite a simple one. It's what you know, but it's not what people will teach you. If people could teach you how to be an entrepreneur, everybody would be an entrepreneur. But it's not there. And there has to be something inside you which says, "No, I can do better than this. I can do something different." Or, what can we find? Sometimes you're just looking for it rather than you know where to go. And everybody has the opportunity to be an entrepreneur, but most people see this opportunity and I wonder, and then it's gone.
Yeah, it's a very good point you make, definitely. Well, Joe, look, yeah, it's fascinating. Your whole story is. It was one of the best books I've ever read, and you get to the end and you wish it wouldn't end, and then you feel like it's become a person that you've developed a relationship with. You feel like you get to know you so well. It's just such a well written book. It's just
the story came out good. Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, it's beautifully put together. So yeah, it must be obviously another piece of work that you should be very, very proud of. And it's great that that's forever. It's one thing to see a brand keep existing decades and decades after you haven't been involved of it, but because of the book, that anyone at any point in time, forever after, can go back and really sense where it started, how it started, why it started. And that's part of the reason why I put this podcast together, is just try and find stories so they've got a place to live. Right. Because I just think it's so important when someone jumps on and wants to know more. It's just that place for a story to live forever is such an important thing.
And it's quite unusual, really, because why did I write it? And people say, why did you write a book? And I said, well, I retired at the end of 1989, and I'm in Tenerife, very nice, best climate in the world, probably, and lying back and just enjoying. And then we got some computers, and I'm looking on Wikipedia and Google, and they're telling me how Reebok began. They're telling me where Reebok came from. And there's a photographer. This is Joe Foster, the founder of Reebok. Who? Don't even know who he is. Just another clue who that person was. So I thought, well, this is probably about time we told the story, and then it's there so that people are not inventing where it came from. And it gave me the opportunity to go back to my grandfather in 1895 and J.W. Foster's. I mean, this was such a famous brand in its day, in its 20s, 30s. This was such a famous brand, and yet nobody would have known about it. It would have died away, gone something in history. But I was able to bring that into the book, and then how this became my story. Because in Google, they were saying, "Oh yeah, J.W. Foster's just changed the name to Reebok." Like you're thinking, no. There's a story here. There's
there's a lot of chapters missing in there. Yeah, because I appreciate your time, and I've enjoyed spending time with you so much. Oh, that's great. No, thank you again for that. And make sure you keep my name in mind if you ever decide to come to Australia. We would love to have you over here.
Okay. I look forward to that.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much again. I hope to speak to you again soon.
Anytime. Okay. Thank you.
Joe. Thanks, everyone, for sticking to the end of the podcast. I hope you did enjoy it. As I said, if you do want to know more, by all means, grab the book called Shoemaker by Joe Foster. If you do like the show, if you enjoyed the show, please do share it. That is the only way that the show does grow. It is made for people that want to hear stories. It's made for people that want to tell stories, and that's really all this show is about. So, if there is anyone you think that would enjoy listening to it, please do feel free to share the show, send on a recommendation. I will do my best to get another episode out to you as soon as I can. I've got a couple in the wings waiting to be edited, and I've got a couple of very special interviews trying to get sorted, but there is more that I am going to try and get out as soon as I can. And you can always find out more at bumpinginto.com.au. Thanks very much, and I will speak to you on the next episode.